Now to the last part of our event, I want to introduce Yaniv Feldman. Yaniv Feldman is the founder and CEO of One Alpha, a company that provides crypto and data intelligence solutions alongside research and analysis services for crypto and blockchain. And you are also part of First Digital Asset Group. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our last panel of the day, I want to invite our guests, Thomas Buschmann, the founder and director of Swiss FinTech Innovation Lab, University of Zurich. Daniel Geistegger, hey, the CEO and founder of Trust Square. And Gilad Novik, partner from Lakestar Capital. Okay, so because I made the short version of the introduction, I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to do a quick introduction of yourselves, so we'll know the relevant background of the panel.
So hi, good morning everyone. My name is Gilad Novik. I'm a partner at Lakestar. Lakestar is a leading European fund established in Switzerland, in Zurich in 2012. And then grew to become a European fund with bases in Zurich, in Berlin, in London, and now we have the local office over here. So we make investments into early and growth companies all over the world. Some of the portfolio companies that we have are companies like Spotify, Airbnb, and many, many others.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Geistegger. I'm co-founder of Trust Square in Zurich. I guess that's the reason why I'm here today. I'm one of the more dynamic ecosystems in Switzerland when it comes to blockchain companies. We have more than 40 startups in our hub in the center of Zurich. We also have a lot of industry connections to the academic side of the Swiss blockchain sphere. One of them is Thomas next to me here. So we are working closely with the academics, and we are organizing a lot of events and education events, and we are working closely with also the financial center in Zurich to help them understand a little bit more what blockchain is all about and why they can open bank accounts and why they should at some times.
Very good that you work very close with academia. I'm the founder and head of the Swiss FinTech Innovation Lab, which is located at the University of Zurich, an interdisciplinary research think tank. We are concentrating on research, education, and innovation transfer. And as part of this, I'm also a member of the Swiss Innovation Council, InnoSwiss, which fosters innovation transfer from academia into practice. Which is also a very strong focus of our initiative. And as you said, we are collaborating very intensively also with Trust Square and other things.
Okay, great, so we have a lot of different aspects of the business we're going to talk about. So I'm a big fan of the top-down approach, where we're talking about Swiss approach to the new financial era. So let's start with the new financial era, okay? So in the last, I would say, 10 years, maybe a little more, we've been seeing the financial system going through a lot of changes, starting from monetary systems, countries, economies collapsing, and a lot of new innovation in the form of technology coming in to try, maybe, and change things. What would you think is the biggest change that has happened in the last 10 years that led us to where we are today?
Maybe I can start with some thoughts. Well, that's an interesting question. Well, when I came into this topic, and this was pretty much in 2008, when the financial crisis was there, and also the new Bitcoin, blockchain, and also fintech era emerged. Everybody was wondering what is happening now, but I think at that point nobody could imagine what it really would mean. And I think still we are at a very early stage, even we are 10 years ahead from now. But what, from my perspective, are the biggest impacts is on one hand that innovation comes from outside the incumbents, but that came really from outside with all these startups on the one hand side. It was the first phase, more or less. What also changed is that the hierarchies of the big, large corporations will decrease. I think that is something that we can observe not only in the financial services industry.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I would say with this trend towards decentralization, which we can see from the technology side also, I think this is something that happens by nature because the technology fosters that more or less, and also this comes to the organizational level now. So I think it's a good thing because it democratizes a system that was not democratic enough in the past. So I think it's very good development. Although I would say it's a very early stage still. But from my perspective, this is the overall, as you said, top-down development we can really see.
What kind of big challenges do you guys see in finance today as something that entrepreneurs should aspire and solve?
Just building on what Thomas just said, and then to answer the question that you just asked, I was in the banking industry myself for more than 20 years, and I was a trader at the time when 2008 happened. I was on the trading floor looking how Lehman Brothers collapsed. I was looking at how Iceland collapsed under the pressure of the debt that they had there, and so I was first-hand witnessing what the system was before. I was going for 10 years through the good times, in the investment banking times. But then I also, for the last 10 years, saw what actually happened since. And so the biggest impact was trust is lost. And I'm more and more open about my thinking when it comes to this because I'm 3 years independent from the banking myself. And I think the lessons that have not been learned yet is the fact that trust needs to be re-established and the innovation needs to take place. And these two things in Switzerland, Adrian said it before, we've built a new system when it comes to banking secrecy, when it comes to building more capital to sustain other shocks in the banking industry, so that we don't go through another 2008 moment where Swiss banks have to be rescued. But all of that is not enough. And the Swiss, I mean, I'm shocked to say that we are back where we were almost 10 years ago when it comes to the share price of my former bank. These things, they have not had any impact on the actual long time sustainability of these banks because they're simply not innovative. They simply didn't learn how to make that opportunity that comes with the crisis a chance for the future, and I have a bit a doubt that they will learn quickly enough that they make it through this phase of innovation that is hitting them now thanks to blockchain technology. And I'm not talking about this. I am very much in the middle. Typically, I'm a Swiss. In the middle between the extremes of the Bitcoin visionaries that think the banking industry will collapse entirely and everything will be decentralized and peer-to-peer. But I also don't believe that it's going to be, and this is still a statement from some of the very senior people in Switzerland and in the financial services, they still say blockchain is Bitcoin and Bitcoin is bad and everything to do is about crime. And so this is a bit less my view as well, of course, and so I'm in the middle, and it's time to recognize that this is going to have an impact on the financial center, especially in Switzerland, and I hope it's going to be soon that they make this realization.
I'm going to touch what Daniel said, and I'm going to follow up to you, Gilad. So, again, one of the biggest issues these days with finance is the measure of trust. And as you know, at least with money and a lot of other things, but at least with money, people have a hard time trusting things that they don't know. So while like banks and the big incumbents have been here for years or decades or centuries for that matter, startups are something new. And we're seeing a lot of new companies in the space trying to build that trust, both towards consumer and towards large financial enterprises. You know, what can you say, as someone who worked a lot with startups, what can you say to entrepreneurs who are looking, you know, to build that trust? What is the best advice you can give them?
Okay, so I think the first important thing is actually to build a company that will deliver to customers. So they will have customers. That's the main thing. Second thing is to have a deep tech, a technology that will make a difference. And the third thing, of course, is you know, that it will be a strong product that people will be able to to use. So I think my advice is actually to identify what is the problem that people actually coming to solve, identify the problem, try to find the best solution, and then to track it with a list of customers.
And what about the trust? I mean, you know, if I, as a small startup, want to start, you know, make people trust me, put their money. You invested, you recently is Revolut.
Revolut was one of our latest investments.
So Revolut is one of what we call the emerging financial institutions going towards millennials. How do you make people trust like 5-6-year-old company and put their money in there? You know, it's not a bank. It doesn't have, you know, like safekeeping, insurance, custodian, a country behind it. How do you build that sort of trust?
So I think, you know, from a VC perspective, it's all about different aspects. The first thing is the entrepreneurs, the ability, whether they can actually deliver, whether they can build a product and then deliver it. Secondly, the numbers, the main actually results of whether we should actually put more money or less. And, you know, following Revolut numbers in the last year is just incredible, unbelievable. That gave us the trust, you know, to make the next investment that they were actually trying to fund.
So let's go back to the macro for a second. You know, in the last, again, 10 years or so, there are a lot of conversations about globalization. The internet has made, you know, a huge leap in terms of connecting everyone around the world. What do you see as the advantage of one territory, say Switzerland, over another in a world that's becoming global in terms of finance and in general?
Thank you. Well, I would say this is maybe one of the biggest challenges, because if you look at such decentralized technologies, or distributed ones, to be more precise, it might be more competition among countries, as we have seen it before, because at the moment there are quite clear rules between countries when it comes to regulation. Maybe an exception is the European Union, but still there, coordination is hard. So the question is, how can we overcome that? And there kind of governance models come into play. And these governance models for decentralized technologies clearly differ from the ones we have, because you cannot apply the rules that we have today that go on from a centralized model to the one that are decentralized. So what do you do when it comes to infrastructure failure? Who is responsible for that? Who do you call as a consumer when something fails? So there are many questions around that are unsolved today. So this question of governance is maybe one of the central ones that has to be solved.
Governance and liability. I mean, you know,
right.
For example, if a decentralized Uber car would have, you know, hit someone, who would you come to complain to?
Exactly, yeah. So I would say this is maybe one of the most challenging parts, and as we can see today, most of the central institutions like the Basel Committee and many others were created also many years ago, but the purpose was a completely different one. And what we can see now at the moment is that be it the G20 or the IMF, all of these organizations want to tackle this problem, but I don't think that they are the right ones to do so. So the question is, who will go into the lead? The US probably won't, because they see the US dollar as the primary backup of the financial system, of the global financial system. So they probably...
Do you see that changing?
Well, I think that will be a hard change. Because they are still the strongest economy, now challenged by China, of course.
25 years from now,
yeah.
Who would be the global reserve? What would be the global reserve currency?
That's a good question. That's prediction in the glass ball. But
your opinion?
Well, what we can currently see, if you look at the numbers, I was just recently having a look at the chart that goes back many centuries from now. And that one, in that one you could see in India and China as the largest global economies. The US wasn't existent at that time. And they now shrinked to a certain extent, and that slide showed that these both economies now increase again. So there is a chance of maybe a change in the next 30 to 50 to 100 years, I don't know. But I think in between that we will see kind of a battle and competition that will be very hard.
Can I answer that question? I think if you extrapolate the last 10 years when it comes to cryptocurrencies and the introduction, I'm not saying Bitcoin, but in general, these currencies that are now becoming more apparent and more strategically interesting as well. I think it's going to be no single dominant currency anymore. It's going to be a super efficient, interchangeable financial system that doesn't need a US dollar to back the world's economy. It can be done in different ways, in a different decentralized fashion, and that's exactly hopefully where the thing goes, because what we exactly don't want is to replace the US dollar with the Chinese yuan or something like this, to have another dominant player in the financial system that then can basically manipulate it as it's done at the moment with the US dollar, because I'm making some aggressive statements today, but I think the banks in Switzerland don't open bank accounts because they are fearful that they lose access to the US dollar clearing, and that was happening not so long ago to a bank, and they basically were dead within a couple of days. If you lose access to dollar clearing as a bank, you have no way you can survive if you're in an international payment business. And so that's the reason why nobody really wants to get near cryptocurrencies, where the US has a very, very strong stance against it. And that's the reason why we, not only in Switzerland, also in Germany and in Estonia. I was in Estonia yesterday. They also don't have bank accounts that can be easily opened because of that thing. But then having said that, having looked at this topic slightly from a different angle, Estonia has also just had the biggest financial scandal in the last years by having a $300 million anti-money laundering case with a bank branch from Denmark. And this is again affecting Swiss banks because they're also involved. And Germany banks, Deutsche Bank just fired head of compliance, I read before, because of that scandal. And nobody really kind of compares these things together. And then it's always one-sided views on how these crypto markets are so bad and everything else is so cleaned up. It's not the case. And it's ultimately a question of looking at everything a little bit more realistically, giving everything a chance, but not kind of say one thing is so super clean now and the other thing is so bad, and kind of be a bit more nuanced when it comes to the situation as it currently is. And so I think it's hopefully going to be decentralized as with everything else. National banks, one way or another, will issue their digital currencies. Some banks will have some countries will have no physical cash anymore, and will be fully digital. And so there's going to be a different model, I hope. And I didn't want to.
I just want to focus to the original question. Is there any kind of advantage to a specific territory, other, in a global world?
Yeah, so I want to actually touch it from a different angle, and I do appreciate that it's a big challenge. At the same time, it's an opportunity. And when everybody actually looking at the US, so US, yes, you have San Francisco, Silicon Valley, when you have all the technology coming from, then Washington, where the government actually sits, and New York, where the money sits. When you look at Europe, and London is a good example, you have all three in the same city. The same goes for other European countries, and that's the advantage.
Okay, so in a global world, let's say we talked about Bitcoin, decentralization, crypto, which are a lot of the innovative things in fintech right now. But let's take a side discussion for a second, and let's look at the emerging institutions like Revolut and Square and Numbers and all these new startup banks that are forming right now, basically trying to remove a lot of the friction that existed in the old financial world, meaning less people, more automation, everything is being done on mobile. It has its advantages and its disadvantages, but how do you see that, in a world, in the same kind of trend that we talked about in the last 10 years? How do you see that influencing the way the ecosystem behaves? I'll be a little more direct. So we have the banks on one end, we have the new institutions on the other. If I want to start playing in that field, what do I need to be aware of? What are my advantages or disadvantages? Taking under account all the things that are happening right now.
Well, I think what we could see in the first phase was that all the challengers wanted to, let's say, disintermediate the banks.
Basically, lower fees. That was the biggest selling point.
Yeah, but that didn't work out in many cases because they still needed kind of a custody service or anything like that, which the banks then provided. So in the next phase, it was much more about collaboration. So how could those two work together? Because the startups very early then recognized that acquiring customers is not an easy thing, which the others had. So they decided to work together. So then the challenger banks came. Like you said, Revolut or now Seba in Switzerland, which is also a new institution there to tackle this problem of bridging the crypto world and the old world. So it's all about collaboration and working together. And I think this is probably at the moment what all of that stuff is all about. But in the end, it's about opening up also. This is what the European Union now forced with the open APIs. In Switzerland, this is not the case, so there is no driving force of that. So it's getting pretty much harder maybe to open up the banks for that. So I would say we are in the midst of that phase until we then go to the third phase that we talked about, having this decentralized, democratic competition of different kind of currencies then.
So basically what you're saying is the bridge between the two worlds is one of the most important things. I think there is an interesting case study just from last week where Six Swiss launched the crypto ETP that became, I think, the most traded exchange in the most traded product in the exchange itself after like a day or two. So that's an example of a bridge between traditional finance and the new economy. What kind of other bridges do you guys see?
I think you just talked about Seba. There's another project called Signum. These are two, they are not just challenger projects, they are really serious businesses that are being established now on the basis of this future of crypto currency, crypto industry, crypto investment. They will be fully regulated banks, I understand, so they have 100 million plus budgets in the thing that they can actually apply for a banking license, so they are credible vis-a-vis the regulator. And these are banks that will change the system now as well in Switzerland. They have, on one hand, we have Revolut, we have N26 coming in, they will become Swiss banks, so they're literally offering services for free to the Swiss retail clients. On the other hand, we have these big projects coming in with Senior, former SMB director, is one of the advisors of Signum Bank, for instance, and so these are serious businesses. This is not something anymore where somebody can look away from the big banks in Switzerland and say it's all this crypto, hype, Bitcoin is all drug money. It's really business that is sustainable for the future, and that will make the whole system change. And so on one hand we have the incumbents that are kind of hopefully waking up now. On the other hand, you have the new entrance when it comes to the challenger banks, and then on the third side, which I'm very happy about, is that we have serious banks being established on a totally new ground with a totally new business model, also serving then the startups that are in that space, obviously as a first client base, and so that's a good thing. So this is changing.
Do you have a bridge? So from one bridge to another, one of the most challenging bridges all throughout the years, covering tech and startups, is the relationship between the industry and the academia, right? There's a lot of interesting research. Most of the new technology comes from the academia, but somewhere along the way, at least to my feeling, the connection was lost. It was very hard to transfer stuff from the theory and the academia back to the industry, and stuff that can be useful and pragmatic for for everyone, and that's been changing in the last few years. I want to give you guys, to give your short pitch, especially you, Thomas, as someone who's running a fintech innovation hub within a university. How do you see that relationship changing?
Well, that's one of my favorite discussions. Thank you for pointing that out. Well, the point is, 10 years ago, the academic community was very much about number crunching from data from the past. So industry questioned really the benefit of academia at that point. Now I think we are coming back to a point where academia can bring benefits to the industry, because we are thinking about topics that might lead us forward, but not in our ivory tower, but together with the industry. So
most of the interesting, the latest technologies in blockchain, cryptocurrency, whether it's ZKP or RSA or any other cryptographic algorithm, even now proof of space-time, which is something that's relatively advanced, are all coming from academia. We're seeing actual PhDs and professors moving and founding companies, which is something that's relatively new.
Well, it's true. It's new in many countries. Although in the U.S. This is not very new. If you look around Stanford and Berkeley, they do it since decades there, and this was more or less the success model, because the system there is really fluent. The professors invest in startups. The venture capital is flowing from university to the startups and also back. So there is a fluent system of this startup ecosystem, academia, incumbents also, that especially in Europe we didn't really apply for many years. And I think this is coming back now, which is good. But still, the incumbents in many cases are still a little bit, let's say, conservative, especially in Switzerland when it comes to investing in that. But I think we're on a good way. So I think this model will be the model for the future, definitely.
Yeah.
If I may add, so we at Lakestar, we have a program with ETH in Zurich, and we actually run an internship kind of a program with the students. So from early stage, when they actually study or working on a certain project, we give them a little bit of insight how the world actually is looking from an investor perspective, at the same time what to focus and how to actually proceed going forward. And we probably will extend this program also with Israeli universities as well in the future.
That's a good headline. One last question, and then I'll open up if you guys have any. What's your advice to someone who's now working his way, usually entrepreneurs, new startups wanting to raise funds, whether ICO or venture capital, in the finance ecosystem? What kind of things or trends or any piece of advice that you can give them that can help them along the way?
So I think, a lot touched the insurance domain. So that's
Don't touch?
Touched.
Touch.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's an interesting domain to look into. I think energy is also a very interesting one. Of the ones that are actually substantial, they're the ones.
I guess coming back to the point before about what Verum Capital is also doing is kind of looking into the opportunities that come with the crypto markets that are now what they are today versus what they were a year ago. There's opportunities in financing through crypto mechanisms when it comes to M&A activities. It looks, for me, very interesting to see how we can actually recover potential failed projects because they didn't have the experienced teams that are needed to build a big project with a lot of funding But there's still a lot of good ideas and a lot of money around because tokens are still around and so forth. And so there's that thing that I would suggest looking into.
Did you see something like that happening? I mean, a failed project, coming to life in a different form?
And not yet, but we are studying some cases, yeah.
Yeah, so we are, besides the blockchain topics, we are just very short before starting another initiative, which is going into insurance. So we also see that. It's called AI in insurance risk management, because I think that the whole risk management of insurance as it is today, very much driven top-down, with mortality tables and things like that, will be just reversed. So there will be nothing like we have it today. So this will be an entirely new model. Maybe even going further, that as we could see it in banking, establishing peer-to-peer platforms for establishing risk communities will be something that could be doable in the near future. And I think this is something on the horizon which is a very interesting development. And the insurtech sector is still very small.
Okay. We have time for a couple of questions. Anyone from the audience? I know that Swiss people are very polite and everything, but feel free. Okay. So thank you guys very much for coming.